Hi, and welcome to the Health Equity Investments podcast, The Fulfilled Truth. My name is Mario, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Keshav Kolur. Um, Keshav is the founder of Clive Capital, and we got connected through the Avestor portal. Through I think he's your partner, correct? This is
John.
Johnny.
Yeah,
Oh,
John.
John. Okay.
Yeah.
And he said that you were a great guest. I'm like, okay, perfect. So I'm looking for awesome guests.
Yeah.
I like to talk to different people and just learn different things. Um, so first, let's just do with a quick introduction. What it is that you do, what it is that you do at Clive Capital, and also your IT job, which is I'm really curious about that too.
Yeah, sure thing. So my background, I've been in tech for coming up on 6 years now. So
Okay.
first 2 years, I worked at a car company on algorithms for autonomous driving, primarily
Oh,
cruise control. So if you know that function where you set speed and your
yeah.
car does its thing. So I was working on that for 2 years, and this was in Michigan. And then switched to Amazon in March of 2021, and then switched to Meta in November of 2021. Also moved to New York City then, which is where I am now.
Okay.
On the investing side of things, I started out as a realtor actually because I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and what I learned from that at least is that I should build a business in real estate. And so I thought, hey, let me just go buy and rent single family homes. I didn't know anyone who was doing that personally too well, and I also didn't have the capital. So I thought becoming a realtor would kill two birds with one stone. Gain
Sure.
experience in real estate and also additional capital from the side hustle. That was March of 2020, but I sold a few homes. That was during COVID when the market shut down. When it
Oh,
opened back
yes.
up, yeah.
Yes.
So I actually got licensed on Leap Day, February 29th,
Oh
2020.
my God.
Yeah,
That's an interesting day.
it is. I remember all these. And then exactly 2 weeks later, COVID hits,
Oh,
markets shut down.
Jesus.
Yeah. So when they opened it back up later that summer, I want to say July, August, I sold a few homes, started looking at investments that I could start making. Luckily, before I went too far down that rabbit hole, one of my good friends from college and a roommate, his dad had just started investing into syndications into apartment buildings. And so he actually came across a Reddit thread where someone was talking about the same thing. And this guy had bought 40 single family homes at his
Oh my.
peak and managed them.
Wow.
And then he was talking about how investing in apartment buildings is way easier and more lucrative, and the tax benefits are better. And personally, for me, it sounds cooler to say I invest into apartment buildings than just homes.
No,
So
that's 100% sure. That's
yeah,
a fact.
but no one I knew besides him was doing this at this time. So to me, it sounded too good to be true. So I reached out to this guy who posted on Reddit, September of 2020. Just hopped on a call with him. He invited me to his virtual meetup. And back then, everything was virtual,
Right.
complete
Right.
lockdown. Kind of worked in my favor because I was able to meet all these new people very quickly, very easily because of, COVID and Zoom. And now that's just the world we live in.
Yes.
But I met a lot of people, started networking and talking to people in the industry, also practice analyzing investments on my own. And it took me a year, and I was in between jobs and stuff too, changing jobs. But it took me a year before I finally got comfortable making my first investment as an LP into 108 apartments in Texas, in your neck of the woods, actually.
Oh, interesting. And
Yeah.
okay.
So I started seeing but it was the scariest thing I'd ever done, just
Yeah.
wire 5 figures of cash to someone I'd never met in person.
Yeah.
So but I started seeing the cash flow coming in. And at that point, it was a proof of concept to me that, hey, this works. It's not just a scam. So I started my company, Clive Capital, in January of 2022. And our goal is to help tech professionals build generational wealth, financial freedom, passive income, reduce their tax bill, all the great stuff that we love to
Mm-hmm.
hear about through passive private equity investments. So far I've helped, again, primarily folks from Amazon, Meta, Google, Microsoft, etc., invest into over 1,000 apartments under renovation, 500 single family homes under development. We're expanding into industrial real estate as well. Hopefully should have our first warehouse closing soon. We're issuing private loans. And also, most recently, just closed my helped my investors invest into their first oil and gas deal, primarily for the tax.
Interesting. So
So
you went real estate, commercial. That's the plan, and now oil and gas. That's a really good diverse portfolio for your investors.
yeah, the goal is to build a diversified portfolio that achieves a handful of buckets that I found investors, want in their portfolio, to some, in personalized balance, which is
Right.
appreciation, cash flow, tax benefits, risk mitigation. I forget there's another one. But and then like charitable investments, that's a recent one I
Okay.
came across too. So I'd like to find, liquidity. Liquidity is the
Sure.
sixth, right?
Sure.
So we'd like to have investments that are as short as 90 days and investments that are as long as 7 years.
Okay.
And my goal is always to stay one step ahead of everyone else, right? I think 10 years ago, investing in multifamily was all the craze. It was new. No one had heard of
Yeah.
it.
Exactly.
Now it's like everyone's getting into it, and the worm is gone. The early bird
Yeah.
has taken it. So my goal is to find the next asset class where it's safe, risk mitigated, but it fits within our portfolio and it hasn't been found out yet and completely, overdone.
So are you still currently working in IT, or are you mainly just handing over, being the boss of the principal of the Clive Capital?
I am. I'm still at Meta, and I
Okay.
actually just hopped off a call where I was hosting an internal meetup at the company too.
Okay.
So I'm still doing both. That's the bags under my eyes here. Yeah.
So I got a question for you then. So back when you were, you had mentioned that you were, kind of like jumping between different jobs, right? In IT, and when were you looking at that computer screen and you said, I gotta do something different. I gotta invest. Must have been a drive in you that said, I need to do a change. When was that? And what was that like?
Yeah, there's a couple of cheesy stories that I will include in here.
Go for it. I love cheesy stories. Go for it.
So my mom will tell you always that when we were living in Denver and I was 2 years old, that the only way to get me to sleep, and this is true, I'm not embellishing here, and the only way to get me to sleep, because I was so high maintenance as a kid apparently, is to drive around the downtown of Denver to get me to look at the big buildings.
Oh,
Um, and even now, I live in New York City, have a great view, plenty of skyscrapers and stuff out here out of my window. So I think I've always had that fascination with real estate, anything that's tangible, honestly. But growing up, I just didn't know anyone who was in the industry. And
right.
so for me, growing up, I was always interested in math, and I was pretty good at it, I would like to think. So I got interested in robotics too, because, there was a physical aspect to
Right.
it. But then, coming out of college, I'd read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And, that's what really got me started, that, hey, anyone can get into real estate. You don't need to be born into, a high net worth family. You can build these
Exactly.
connections along the way. And I think a lot of the recent regulation that's passed, recent as in the last decade, has made things a lot easier, a lot more accessible for everyday investors to get into these types of investments. So when I read that book, a switch flipped in my head saying, hey, tech isn't the only way I can get
Okay.
into this. I have to build a network. I have to do this from the ground up, but it's possible. And I
Okay.
can get back to something that, again, that is physical, that is tangible. That's why, oil and gas also interests me, because I can look at it and say, that we're drilling here. I can pull it up on Google Maps, on satellite, pull up the oil rigs. So physical investments have always interested me more. Crypto is not as exciting. And the only reason
Right.
I would invest in crypto is just for the crazy high returns.
Right. Right.
So
So that's
I,
an interesting thing. You mentioned that. So for you, investing was more of a, um, obviously the catalyst was reading the book, right? Rich Dad,
yeah,
Poor Dad. And then it opened your eyes into this whole different world. And would you say it gave you the comfort to just dive right in?
exactly. Yeah. Just that, anyone can get started. Kiyosaki didn't have a background. He got it through his, best friend's rich dad,
Right.
as he calls it. So it's just a matter of finding your rich dad out there, just to use the terminology from the book, who
Of
can
course.
basically like a mentor who can guide you through, or a community who can guide you through this new world of investments.
Okay. So since you have the inspiration, right? So to begin your journey towards final independence was the book. You had the I would say the guts to just jump right in, at a young age to say, okay, I want to do something different. Since then, what would you say is an uncomfortable truth about money or investing that people often avoid discussing?
That people often avoid discussing.
Yeah.
I think people won't, I don't know if this is discussing, but people won't admit, and I haven't really thought, I've only recently come to this conclusion myself. Being trained as an engineer, I'd like to think that I rely pretty heavily on logic and rationale. But I think a lot of decisions that we make at the end of the day are gut decisions. We can do
Okay.
all the research that we want to do. But the downside of that, and I think a lot of engineers and people in tech and other STEM fields in general fall victim to, is analysis paralysis. At
Right.
some point, you're going to have 70, 80% of the facts. You'll never get 100%. There's always going to be some uncertainty. And if there wasn't any uncertainty, then your reward would also be a lot lower, right? If you want certainty, go invest into treasury bills or bonds and have fun at 5, 6%.
Exactly.
But if you want the slightest bit of uncertainty, you have to be comfortable with that. And that means that at some point, you're going to have to let go and trust yourself that you did your homework and make that jump. And I think that final 10, 20% you get, that decision that you actually make is with your emotions, right? It's your gut instinct telling you, hey, you're confident, you're prepared, go for this.
So, as
So
somebody who's been doing this for a handful of years, right,
yeah,
and you being an engineer working in IT, and as you said, your target is, the people in that field, and I believe you also mentioned doctors and stuff like that. So, when you're talking to somebody like an engineer that they do the analysis and they also go into analysis paralysis, you having now over a handful of years of experience, how do you explain to that person that's just stuck in the analysis paralysis, like I slap him across the face a little bit and say, "No, it's okay. Trust me." I mean, what do you say to them?
yeah, usually, I mean, I'm on investor calls all the time with a lot of these folks, my avatar, my fellow tech folk, and they're always rightfully so skeptical, right? Anyone is
Okay.
skeptical, but I think people who are trained in STEM are especially skeptical, right? If you think of engineers in the traditional sense who are building airplanes, buildings, they're trained to be skeptical, to be risk
Right.
averse so that your airplane works, your buildings don't collapse. So what I tell them is, one, I've been in your shoes. I was there 4 years ago. It took me a year to get comfortable with this because no one else I knew was doing this. And I had to get really comfortable with it myself. And I was 23 at the time. So
Oh my goodness.
the minimum
Yes.
investment of 25, 50,000, that's a lot for me
Yes.
at the
Yes.
time. So that's one, is I've walked through your shoes. I did the analysis myself and I know what you're feeling, right? And so then I go into, hey, here I'm pretty transparent. I think that also helps. I send them information. Here are our past investments. Here's the PPM, the private placement memorandum, the operating agreement, the subscription agreement, all of these documents that our SEC attorneys prepare, because our investments are monitored by the SEC, right? The same as the stock market are, because at the end of the day, we're also selling securities. So I provide them with that. I provide them with pitch decks of our past investments, of the financial modeling, just so people see how we're getting to these quote unquote outrageous numbers when really it's just they don't know that another
Right.
world of alternative investments exist. I send over investor testimonials too. And then I think another big thing is that I invest right alongside them into all of these deals.
Okay.
And I think that's another big thing. um, because you show skin in the game, and I don't have any money in the stock market except for my 401k, which has
Okay.
stock market right now. I've alternative assets for me are far superior to anything you could do in the stock market, unless you're investing into a hedge fund, that's doing 60, 70% a year pretty consistently. Like, I think the Medallion Fund is one of the few out there that I would be interested in investing in the stock market. But beyond that, I'm all in on what I believe in. My portfolio shows exactly that too. So
So have you encountered an investor that you've talked to that you provided? So let me ask you this. So tell me a story in which you encounter an investor, you gave them all the information, you provided everything, like everything you said, the testimonials, the data, the returns, worst case scenario, the whole thing, right? And all they had to do was just like go, right? And you couldn't convince them. And then somehow you were able to flip them. You have any stories like that you had this one, like somebody in your mind that pops into your head and you could be like, oh yeah, I remember dot dot dot.
Yeah, there's always a couple of people, I would say it's a spectrum. My very first investor, bless his soul, uh, I was within 2 or 3 weeks of starting my company. Someone had referred him to me, someone I had never met in person, but they just started seeing the content I was putting out. And so he wired me $50,000. So
Okay.
that's one end of the spectrum where they take their referral, their friends or family's word of mouth as gospel and they go in, right?
Okay.
Then and they don't need much convincing. They'll do a gut check on you, and as long as everything checks out, it's good. The other end of the spectrum is you give someone everything that you could possibly give them: your YouTube channel, your LinkedIn posts, your referrals from investors, banks, insurance companies, lawyers, CPAs, etc. You give them past deals. You walk through existing deals with them, and even then, it's not enough. So that's another extreme, right? There are people out there who are millionaires who are probably just invested in T-bills because they're so risk averse
Hmm.
and they don't feel comfortable putting their money in the hands of other people, right? So and sometimes you're just not going to win those battles, and that's just how some people are wired, right? Some people, they don't feel they need to have control over everything, that like over their money, and they can't sleep at night if it's not that way, and
So
that's
then
fine.
what do you tell them? Do you say, okay, I don't think this is going to work out, and let's just shake hands and say goodbye?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I just say, hey,
Okay.
I'm always here. The door's always open in case, one of our offerings or webinars does interest you. But always, if you know anyone else who's interested, feel free to send them along my way. And I usually like on that end of the spectrum, people who need more proof, I usually just let my work do my talking for me.
Gotcha.
So I just keep executing, keep updating people on social media. Hey, we made this new closing. Here's how our investment's performing. And some people need to stay on the sidelines and watch for a few years before they feel comfortable jumping in.
Okay.
Some people never jump in. So you do
That
the
makes
best you
sense.
can. I try to be honest and transparent and provide a level of detail that they're interested in. I've made the mistake of, when I was initially talking to my friends and family about it, just walking through underwriting and Excel sheets, and I put
Oh
them
my
to sleep.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yes.
I put them to sleep. So I learned my lesson hard, the hard way
Know your
there.
audience, right?
Know your audience, right? So
Yeah.
exactly. So if someone's really interested in that, they will ask. But if not, I
Okay.
don't get into Excel sheets anymore.
So, what advice would you give somebody who is in IT or tech, right? So within your field, who feels stuck in their current financial situation?
Yeah, so I would say, if you're at one of these top tech companies and you're listening, again, I've worked at two of them. Well, I worked at Amazon. I currently still do work at Meta. I joined Meta when the share price was at $330. And
Okay.
as we all know in tech, your compensation, a good chunk of it's directly tied to the stock price. So I had shares granted at 330. This was in the
Okay.
peak of the market at November 2021. Talk about horribly timing the market. Then interest rates started rising in 2022. Companies started cutting costs. Tech had multiple rounds of layoffs.
Right.
Tens of thousands of workers laid off. Meta stock went down to $88. That
Oh,
was
Jesus.
a fourth of what I had it granted at. So my
Yeah.
salary got reduced by, a significant amount.
Sure.
And now we're back up, and that's good. But imagine you're working at NVIDIA now, right? And
Hmm.
if anyone's been following what happened on Monday with the DeepSeek
Yep.
news, you're probably a sad NVIDIA employee if you just joined recently. So all that to say, we get compensated pretty well. A good amount of it, though, is directly correlated to the stock market. And as we've seen, the stock market is very volatile because you have the ability to buy and sell. People panic buy and panic sell
Hmm.
all the time without any discipline. And what someone else decides to do with their money, like if BlackRock just decides to sell, all of their shares, that's going to affect you and your compensation directly.
Correct.
So, I mean, that could happen in real estate too, but it's not the instant crash that it is in the stock market, right? 20% correction in a day, you won't see that in real estate.
Correct.
So you're going to get compensated well. Realize that a lot of it is tied to your volatile stock options, right? And also realize that it's golden handcuffs. You're getting paid really well, but at some point you have to decide, hey, how much longer am I going to sit through this and watch benefits keep getting cut, watch my fellow employees keep getting cut from the workforce before I decide and before I wake up and decide, hey, I have to take control of my own destiny. Before, all of a sudden I wake up one day, I'm getting paid whatever, $300,000 in meta stock, and the next day I'm laid off because AI took over my job, right?
Right.
And Zuckerberg actually, I think on a Joe Rogan podcast recently said that they're looking to replace entry and mid-level engineers starting 2025. So we're all eventually replaceable, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the workforce, you're not replaceable with your family, with your friends, things like that. So I'm rambling, but all of this to say that you have to focus on, don't just let your investments be in the stock market. You have to focus on building a passive income, building a portfolio outside the volatile stock market, buying back your own time, your own freedom, so that even if your job did get cut, that you'll still be fine. Even if the stock market crashed tomorrow, you'll still be fine because you have passive income coming in from real estate and alternative investments that's paying you $10,000, $20,000 a month. And passive income, in my opinion at least, helps me sleep a lot better at night than a huge nest egg that could drop 20, 30% in a
Right.
day.
Right.
Even
So
more.
do you currently have anybody within your world that is kind of freaking out about what's happening with AI? And then do you counsel them and say, hey, this is what I've been doing. This is my company. You can do something like this too. It's okay to invest. Do you have any conversations like that with some of your peers?
We educate people all the time in person, one-on-one calls through social media and group settings too.
Well, no, I'm not talking about like you and your company. I'm talking about like Bob, gives you a call and say, hey, I see your website. I see your YouTubes.
Yeah.
Is this for real? Do you ever have anybody call you up like that and say, come on?
Yeah. I mean, people have called me up on our, like from our podcast, they've called us up and said, hey, this is, crazy. Would love to learn more about what you do. People have been referred to us that way too.
Okay.
And the first reaction of disbelief is natural because
Of
I
course.
believe up until 2012, we could not publicly raise capital from everyday investors. You had to know someone to be able to invest into these opportunities, right?
Right.
So that's one reason people haven't heard of these opportunities, is because you couldn't publicly advertise them until 12 years ago. Number two, it is a privilege to be able to invest into these investments. Not a lot of people have $50,000 lying around that they can deploy and not see for 5, 6 years every year.
Right.
Most people, I don't even know what the unfortunate statistic is at this point. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck. So I
Yes.
think that's another thing, is this privilege is only available to a very small subset of the population. So it's only natural that if you're not in these circles of high earning professionals, doctors, tech employees, banking, consulting, you won't have heard about these. So that state of disbelief is very natural at this point. I'm kind of suspicious if someone doesn't have that disbelief, honestly, unless they're experienced or they've been referred. But I look forward to it. It's something I've been used to at this point, 3 years in the business.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then when everybody knows your story, right? And again, so it's interesting when you look at people through from far away, right? So I was looking at your stuff, your website. As I told you, your website is awesome,
And I
extremely
appreciate it.
robust.
Thank you,
It's
Mark.
really really educational, and I do understand what you mean because it takes a certain level of understanding in regards to investments, right? It's the accredited investor, right?
Yep.
The investor who is aware of like, okay, I know if I'm going to put $100,000 in oil, I might lose it, right? And they're like, it's okay, I don't need that money. I put that money to the side, right? Um, Everything looks awesome, right? YouTube, you are in ton of podcasts, which you like Mr. Podcast, which I love. And so, how do you tell somebody, or what would you say is your a one mistake that you made early on in your financial journey that you learned from?
One mistake I made early on in my financial journey. Let's see. I would say moving too slow. And I think that's still something that I'm trying to improve. even as I grow my business, right? Not as a passive investor, but even as I grow my business. And I think just in, even personal life too, I think people just take things personally really slow just to be sure, right? Like we see
Sure.
this even in like dating culture, right? There's like 8 different phases. There's, oh, we're talking, now we're exclusive, now we're moved in, now we're engaged, then we're engaged for 3 years. Who knows, we might break up during that, then we finally get married, and then God forbid 10 years later a divorce happens, whatever.
Oh my
Anyway,
goodness. Yeah.
very tangential, but I think people are very risk averse these days. And they move really slow because I think they have the luxury of time and options. But you're gonna, like, every second passes, no one's getting any younger, and if you actively don't work on it, no one's getting any wealthier. Inflation and taxes are constantly stealing from all of us.
So, so in other words, stop sitting on your butt, get up and do something about it.
Yeah. Like, even for me, when I first learned about syndication in August of 2020 to finally pulling the trigger in August of 2021, that first year, I personally think, looking back, that was way too long for me to do my research and
Interesting.
diligence. I think I could have moved faster. I'm not saying do less due diligence. I'm saying, instead of doing an hour a day of reading or whatever, do 2 or 3 a day. Compress the time that you need to make. And once you've made a few initial decisions, you're pretty set, right? Like, now that I've learned to invest into syndications, I'm pretty comfortable. I know who I can trust and not trust. I know if I need to get into acquiring small businesses, I can network my way into there.
Right.
The initial period of doing work's very tough, and it's a lot of work. But once you're over that initial hump, then it's smooth sailing from there, right?
Okay.
I draw an analogy to, like, when you're taking off in a plane, you only ever feel the acceleration of takeoff, but once you're cruising at altitude, you're not feeling that you're going 800 miles an hour.
Right.
So that's what I would encourage people to do. And that's a mistake that I made, is not moving quick
Okay.
enough. Every day I still try to figure out, how can I move quicker? How can I make decisions faster without significantly risking the outcome, right?
So now that you're on a path of financial independence, what would you say is a common myth about building wealth that you would like to debunk?
Ooh, common myth. Even in the industry that, okay, I don't even know. There's a few that I would caution people against. One is, even as a passive investor, I wouldn't say it's 100% passive. I do think investors should still be educated on what they're getting themselves into, have a baseline of education. People will sell you on this, that, hey, you don't need to lift a finger. You just send me the money and sit back.
Right.
And that's how Ponzi schemes happen. That's how money is lost. That's how properties foreclosed on. That's one. Number two, and it's not an easy process, but at the same time, anything worth having isn't easy. If it was really easy to be wealthy, if it was really easy to have a 6-pack, we would all be walking around, 7 figures and 6-packs. So
That's actually one of the funniest things I've heard. That is great.
So
That is
I would
really
say
great.
that. And then third is, you're going to fail, right? Like, not to
Right.
go from funny to serious, but you're going to fail. You're
Yeah.
going to lose money at some point. No matter how much research you have done, no matter how good the team is that you're working with, everyone's going to fail at some point, right? And if you haven't failed, or if the team you've invested with hasn't failed yet, to some degree, it doesn't mean they've been foreclosed on or sued. Just even property occupancy dropped to 50%, or they paused distributions, it means they just haven't been in the business long enough. So, and if you haven't lost on investment yet, it means you haven't been investing long enough either. So I would say, don't let one bad investment sour the taste, ruin the taste of investing. Pick yourself back up, learn what you did wrong or what the team did wrong that you invested with, and then take those learnings into your next investment. I've seen a lot of people who, and it's unfortunate that there are a lot of Ponzi schemes or foreclosures out there right now with what the market's seeing. But a lot of people make one bad investment and then they just shy away from ever investing again, and
Right.
it becomes a trauma for them almost. Whereas good investors know, you're going to have maybe one deal out of every 10 go bad. But as long as the other 9 more than make up for it, you're golden.
So, what are your views then in regards to the financial education? And I'll explain. I'll explain my point. So, in school, right? You're taught, let's say you, for example, right?
Yeah.
Your passion was STEM, right? The
Yeah.
maths, the sciences, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming as you were going through your, university and your colleges and high school and all that stuff, most people are taught, and I worked at a hospital, okay, for 24 years. I was in healthcare, and most people are taught work hard, right? Put in your 40, 60 hours a week for 30 to 35 years or 40 years if you start really young, and then retire. And then hopefully your social security kicks in and then you saved enough money. What are your views on that mentality?
I mean, one, for anyone who's listening who is millennial or onwards, like wipe the word social security from your vocabulary. I think we'll be lucky if that program still exists by the time we're, applicable for it. And I would say that's how I'm going to use the proverbial day. That's how they
Okay.
keep you working, right? All these companies, they need people to keep working so that they can pay their taxes, so that they can get stuff done for the community. And what else? Also, just, I don't know, probably to keep you distracted from what's really going on in the world, right? With your 9 to 5, I don't know. Let me formulate my thoughts here. So,
I kind of feel where you're going, so go for it. Just spill it out. Say it. Say it.
I think like we're being told what to think, right? What to
Okay.
believe and things like that. And there's a lot of troubling trends there, right? With media and censorship and even just what we're teaching our kids nowadays, like what's okay and what's not okay. Um, if they keep you working and you're just invested in the stock market 8% a year in inflation, or 10% and inflation stealing 2% of that, you can't focus on what really matters. You can't take care of your health. You can't take care of your kids, take care of your loved ones. I don't think that the sole purpose of investing is to retire. I personally like what I do, and no matter how much money I had, how much financial freedom I had, I would continue doing it. I think it's about having options, that you don't have to work a job. You don't have to go back into work and waste an hour of your life commuting in traffic. I think it's
Yeah.
that you can spend more time focusing on your health, meal prepping, going and working out, spending time with your family and kids, rather than missing your kids' soccer games because your boss is on your case to finish up something for a deadline.
Right.
So I'm not saying you should quit your job and that should be the goal of investing.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
having the option to quit your job in case things get dicey, or in case your career puts your family, your friends, your health in the backseat. So
So you are a teacher. I'm pretty sure you know that by now. You're a teacher. You're an educator, right? With your time that you spend teaching and educating fellow professionals like yourself,
yeah.
you're dealing with, like I said, high level, high net worth type individuals. High brains, big brains, and all that stuff, right? And the frustrating part about the finance education, right, is that at least for me, I see it, and I talk to a lot of people, people like yourself, a lot of the entrepreneurs or business owners.
Yeah.
They figure that out on their own, right? How do you think that can be changed? I mean, do you have mentors? I'm assuming. Would you ever mentor like a young 12, 13-year-old, 15-year-old kid and say, hey, let me show you this, or this is what I learned. I am 10, 15 years ahead of where you're at. Let me show you the ropes. Would you ever do that, something like that?
I probably, maybe not one on one, unless they were interested in working with me on any of our companies. But it's I think it's about educating people with the power of the internet, with the power of social media. Content like you're putting out right here, Mario, is especially useful for people. It's how I got started too. If we were back in the 1980s and my family wasn't in real estate, I don't know how I would have gotten in
Yeah.
this world. And I think on top of that, it is the best way to spread the message is just to post, it's social media, I would say. And then just telling people in person about what you're doing. Speaking at events, hopefully I'll be able to have the opportunity to speak at some local colleges here this year, which I'm
Okay.
really looking forward to. But I think it's just keep telling people about what you're doing through this amazing power we have now in the 21st century of the internet, of social media, and then hope your message gets out there. And then just deliver on your promises, right? Don't just tell people real estate investing is great. Show them that with the great returns you're producing for them.
So one thing that I've noticed just talking to you for the last 35 minutes is that, and just from your content that I've learned from you, is that you're actually a really good teacher. You're actually, and you're passionate about what you do. And I can see the passion, I can feel it coming through our little camera here, and I love that part. I think you would be an awesome mentor to a lot of these younger people, that I do hope that, if you have the opportunity to teach somebody or even just speak in front of these universities and tell them, like, it's not easy, this is hard, but look at me, I did it. I think people need to see people who kind of look like how you and I look like, and say, hey, these guys can do it, I'm pretty sure you can. So I hope you do take that opportunity, because you have a lot of passion that it's palpable. It's
I
really,
appreciate it, Mario.
it's really palpable. It's just really, really awesome. I don't know what it is. You could just, you're it's just coming out. Um. So now, talking about in regards to your current situation, um, how would you define true wealth and fulfillment beyond just money?
Yeah. This is a great question. I think I will caveat it with this. People say that money is not everything, but I think money affects everything that's important. Most divorces that happen, one of the major reasons it happens is for financial hardship.
Okay.
Um, that's your health relationships with not only your spouse, but your kids. Number two, it impacts your health, right? If you don't have enough money to allocate an hour or two a day to the gym, to eating healthy, to meditating, to getting proper sleep, then what's the use if you're in the grave? Uh, Even if you don't have all the money in the world, money would have helped that problem. I'm not
Right.
saying if you have money, it automatically solves all these problems. There are a lot of very wealthy people who are divorced, who are chronically ill too, but I'm saying it helps. So that's one. I wouldn't neglect financial freedom or wealth. Other types of freedom or wealth that I value, though, are geographic, being able to
Okay.
travel and work from wherever I want personally. Another one is relationships, right? I want to spend my time with who I want to, right? Oftentimes, if grew up in a small town and you can't escape it for whatever reason financially, then that's the circle that you're stuck in, right? You might not be able to afford to be able to move to New York because it is way too expensive.
Right. Right.
I would say health is another big thing, another big form of freedom, or like wealth to be chasing after. And physical, mental, spiritual, all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that much else matters beyond that, honestly. I think that for me, if I'm looking at something, I always look at how will it affect me financially and, with my health and also in my relationships. Those
And
are
I
the
think that's actually a really good point, because it kind of goes towards the education that a lot of, not just kids, but a lot of people need, because they live, you had mentioned the social media, they live in the, I don't know if you remember, what was that? I forgot the app. My son knows it. They used to do it. It was Snapchat,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Snapchat was like you take a picture, a few seconds, and then it was done, right?
Yeah.
It was like 6 seconds of information, and people have that short attention span.
Yeah.
And I believe, tied into how you mentioned about the Ponzi schemes and all these other things, that a lot of people look at these pictures and these videos of people driving most likely rented Lamborghinis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Posting themselves in front of somebody else's mansion and saying, "This is who I am," and they fall for that. They don't understand, like you understand, the hard work that it takes a lot
Yeah.
out of the life that you're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's true. It's not just about the money. When people chase the money, it will not come to them. When
Right.
you're going out and you're actually helping people, helping out your community, finding ways to give back, it pays you back, 100%. And I'm again, it kind of feels like that's where you're at. Okay, I have two more questions, because I want to respect your time. Okay,
Yeah.
the first question is this: what practical steps can someone take today to start investing smarter and living a more fulfilled life?
So investing smarter, I think it's listening, it's getting educated is step one. Honestly, I think mindset is number one. I think one, you have to, as like you might think this is cuckoo juice, but I think you have to tell yourself that you're capable of being wealthy, of making
Yeah.
these investments, that they're not outside of your reach. If you doubt yourself, then everyone else is going to doubt you too. If you believe in yourself, as cheesy as it sounds, and you show up every day and obviously a host of other stuff, then other people will start taking you seriously too. But if you restrict yourself and say, hey, I can't make these investments, I'm only going to stick to my 401k, this just wasn't meant for me, then you're just shutting off a lot of doors. So mindset is number one. And also, I think within mindset is the ability to, again, move quickly, get educated, and take risks, right? I think those are big things. And learn to work with people. No one can go far without a team, without
Right.
people to work with. I'm personally not able to invest into apartment buildings and private loans and single family homes and oil and gas and manufacturing warehouses all by myself. It's a team effort. So I'd say those are some of the basic, mental frameworks that you need and like characteristics to succeed. Once you do that, it's about putting in the hard work of getting yourself educated, analyze deals, practice, looking at documents and analyzing pitch decks, network with people, build your, knowledge base. And then once you feel ready, then make your first investment, right? Make it yourself and then look at how it's doing, take the good learnings, take the bad learnings from it, improve every day. Fulfillment, I think everyone has to, and it's personal, right? Figure out what's important to you in your life. Do you want to work 16 hours a day? Is work really what you like doing? Or do you want to work 8 hours a day and then spend a lot of time with family
Right.
and friends and hobbies? I don't have any hobbies, for example. And that's not something I prioritize, even though my friends and wife tell me that I should be prioritizing hobbies.
Okay.
So fulfillment is, money is a tool, I would say. It's not the end all be all at the end of the day. So it's a tool. So use it to design your lifestyle that you want. So figure out what your priorities are. For me, it's staying healthy and it's spending time with people that I care about. I don't really care for hobbies at the moment. Not really a fan of sports, social media, video games, nothing like that. So that's what I optimize for. And I make sure that and I love traveling too. I've been to
Okay.
26 countries
Well,
so far.
that could be your hobby. It's traveling.
It's an expensive hobby, but yeah.
Hey, it's okay. It is your hobby, and you that's yours. You own it. That's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. Okay. The
Yeah.
last question. So you're a successful business person, successful entrepreneur. You have multiple investments, and on top of that, you have a good high level profession. Which is really really cool. Being an IT and all that stuff. I will say almost cutting edge, right, with tech and all that.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out, not necessarily in IT or anything like that, but somebody who's looking at starting their own business or being an entrepreneur? What would be the one piece of advice you would let them know?
I would recommend, if they don't have this skill already, is to learn the skill of like patience and delayed gratification. On top of
Okay.
everything I've already mentioned, social media paints it to be very easy to start your own businesses, to make investments. You don't realize how many, shit storms you have to walk through, how many times you're going to
Yes.
get punched in the gut. Deals will go sideways. Partners will sue you. They'll steal from you. They will lie to you. Market, things out of your control. The market will screw you over, right? Like COVID, I'm pretty sure negatively impacted a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Very certain, actually. So I would say it's delayed gratification, but as cheesy as it sounds, like just don't give up. Because the same level of difficulty that you're going through, and I tell this myself every day, it's how I get through every day, is if I'm going through this, then everyone else is also going through this too.
Yep.
And as long as I stick it out longer than everyone else, and I make it a point to improve every day, eventually I'll come out on top. I will succeed. My business will succeed. My investors will succeed, etc.
Mr. Keshav, that was awesome. I really thank you for your time today. And like I said, I want to respect your time. So Thank you so much for being on. Thank you so much for all those nuggets of information because you brought in some really interesting one-liners. I mean, it was really, really good information. And like I said, I really thank you for sending your passion through the camera and your mic because your passion is felt right all the way over here in Texas. And whoever's going to listen to this, they can feel the passion and the love that you have for what you're doing. So thank you so much for being in today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mario. I appreciate you having me on, and happy to help and provide value in any way I can to you and your listeners.
Beautiful. Thank you so much and take care.
Yeah.